What up, YouTube? Here with a post-fight video of the Alberto Lopez versus Reiya Abe fight. Now, before I give y'all the summary of what happened in the fight, I'm going to tell you the results first. Alberto Lopez was able to retain his IBF featherweight title versus Reiya Abe via 8th round TKO stoppage. Now, there wasn't no knockdowns. Lopez wasn't able to drop Abe, but because of the swelling that was on the right eye of Reiya Abe, the referee had to call the stop to the bout because it wasn't any competition from the beginning of the fight all the way to the end of the fight. And that pretty much sums up the conclusion of what had happened in this fight with Lopez and Abe. And for Lopez to do that versus who was the number one ranked contender according to the IBF featherweights contenders ranking, it is an impressive show that Lopez put on. And now Lopez has won 13 consecutive fights in a row, 8 of them winning via TKO. Now, Alberto Lopez is on a uppity slope, and he has got to be ranked number one, I say, out of all the champions at featherweight currently, because there's no current unified or lineal featherweight champion in the featherweight division. And with the amount of experience and the success that Alberto Lopez has, he has to be considered the number one featherweight in that division right now. And Reiya Abe and his corner didn't campaign for a argument on the referee's decision when the referee decided to step in and call a halt to the bout when Alberto Lopez started to press the action more. And throughout the whole fight, after the second round, that is, because that's when Reiya Abe's right eye started to close shut due to accumulation of punches that was from Alberto Lopez, and the doctors were checking on that right eye almost every round and asking Reiya Abe and his camp, do they want to continue with the fight? And much credit to Abe, because he showed great heart and resilience and will and fortitude to want to continue competing when he had a handicap of his right eye being swelled severely. And Reiya Abe, he is very agile on his feet. He is quick on his feet. He is very mobile. He's very fluid. He can fluctuate, maneuver throughout the ring very well. But he didn't follow it up with punches to stop his opponent from closing that gap and cutting off the ring versus him. At one point, he has to put his foot down and cement and stamp his foot to the canvas to throw shots back to have his opponent get off of him and not be a sitting duck and a standing target that just stands in front of his opponents. Not that Abe was doing that. As I said, Abe is very fast and very agile with his footwork, but he didn't do nothing to stop Alberto Lopez at his tracks from coming towards him. And that was the whole plan of Alberto Lopez, was to cut off the ring and have Abe trapped in certain spots in the ring where he could go to sufficient work at Abe with flurries of punches and press him with his aggressive volume and work rate. And that was the key to success for Alberto Lopez. And Abe wouldn't throw nothing where Lopez would back off of him, where it was respectable to say he threw a powerful enough shot for Luis Alberto Lopez to diversify his game and adapt throughout the course of the fight. And that's because Abe wouldn't throw nothing meaningful. And the most Abe would throw is a jab. And then after that, he would throw meaningless punches with non-full potency, to sort of say, non-full effort behind the shots that he was throwing towards Luis Alberto Lopez. It looked more like a tired, desperate attempt from Abe to say, please get off of me, instead of throwing a meaningful, full effort of a shot to Luis Alberto Lopez to back up off of him. And that's what helped Luis Alberto Lopez execute his game plan through the entirety of the fight. And Luis Alberto Lopez, his ability of level change and his resilience of sticking to his game plan, and his level change, as I have said, his work rate, his volume, and his consistency is consistent all throughout his fight, as he has displayed throughout his whole entire career, but as well as his ability to throw from different angles, almost awkward angles, to witness, to see Luis Alberto Lopez throw from, and that diversifies his offense, and that is a appreciative factor that an observer like myself can appreciate from Luis Alberto Lopez's arsenal. And we don't see that aspect displayed by a lot of fighters. It is rare to see fighters throw from different variety of angles, and that can be considered to be throwing from awkward angles that catches their opponents off guard, much like Luis Alberto Lopez has displayed to do, especially in this fight. Despite the fact that not discrediting Luis Alberto Lopez's game, nor am I discrediting the ability of Reiya Abe, but with Abe's fight that he put on for this fight versus Luis Alberto Lopez, it almost made it easy for Luis Alberto Lopez to throw from those angles, because Abe, as I said, with all due respect, no disrespect intended to Reiya Abe, he didn't put up much of a challenge for Luis Alberto Lopez to keep him guessing. And Luis Alberto Lopez, as I said, his level change is him being able to mix up his punches from going upstairs and downstairs, and his commitment to dig into the body is a attribute of Luis Alberto Lopez that is a factor to him that makes him a complete champion, and that regards him as, at least from my rankings when it comes to the featherweight division, I have him noted as the best featherweight in featherweight boxing. And with this current momentum and the streak and roll that Luis Alberto Lopez is on right now, it's hard to argue the fact that Luis Alberto Lopez is the best, not only the best fighter, but the best champion, the top dog, to sort of say, at featherweight. And I would like to see Luis Alberto Lopez, after this impressive performance where he yet again successfully defended his IBF featherweight title versus Reiya Abe, who didn't perform like the number one contender and put up the much of a challenge that at least the IBF was expecting for their number one ranked contender to pull versus their champion. Now, I think the next and the right step for Luis Alberto Lopez is to try and unify the featherweight titles. Now, we have 3 of the 4 featherweight champions that work with Top Rank, including Luis Alberto Lopez, and that's why, promotionally speaking, it'd be an easy fight for Top Rank and the title organizations to make a unified title bout happen in the featherweight division. Now that Lee Wood had decided to vacate the WBA featherweight title, which he once held, and decided to move up to super featherweight, that left vacancy for the WBA featherweight title. And on that same card, on that night, that main event, on the same card that the Lopez and Abe fight was featured in. Now, I don't know why this fight with Lopez and Abe wasn't the main event, because Lopez is the more reputable fighter still to this day, above a rookie fighter like Raymond Ford. And I say that with all due respect, but it's maybe because the fight was in New York, and Raymond Ford, being a New Jersey-based fighter, geographically speaking, fans could have showed out more to support Raymond Ford than they were to spectate the fight with Luis Alberto Lopez. And that's perhaps why this fight with Lopez and Abe was the co-featured main event instead of it being the main event as I was expecting the fight to be. But anyways, Raymond Ford became the new WBA featherweight champion that same night where Luis Alberto Lopez defeated Reiya Abe to successfully defend his IBF featherweight title. And now, after Ford defeated Kolmatov to become the new WBA featherweight champion, this could perhaps lead to a title unification bout sometime in the future, with Luis Alberto Lopez putting his title on the line versus Raymond Ford putting his newly won WBA featherweight title on the line for a featherweight title unification bout. Now, would I say that's the ideal opponent next for Luis Alberto Lopez? I say Raymond Ford is still a little too green to get in there with the likes of a veteran like a Luis Alberto Lopez, and especially with the current streak of a momentum that Lopez has got going on right now. That would be a very dangerous fight that, if I was on Raymond Ford's team, I would not recommend for Raymond Ford to step in there with Luis Alberto Lopez until he gets 2 or 3 more bouts under his belt where he pulls off a incredible, impressive performance to where now he can be considered to be amongst the top dogs at featherweight, regardless of the fact that Raymond Ford is a champion at featherweight, undefeated, highly skilled, but is still a rookie with not only the credibility and the reputation, but overall professional experience as well. And the fact that Ford got in there with somebody of the likes of a Kolmatov, who statistically, on paper speaking, was evenly matched. And that's why the WBA, after Lee Wood vacated his WBA featherweight title, had their number 1 and 2 ranked best contenders according to their organization's featherweight rankings step in there to compete for that vacant WBA featherweight title. And for Raymond Ford to have that hard-fought victory over on Komatov, definitely, without a shadow of a doubt, adds to Ford's stepping stool of climbing up amongst being recognized as one of the top elite featherweights. But he hasn't been in there with the likes of Luis Alberto Lopez and the experience and the skills and the momentum right now that nobody in the featherweight division has other than Luis Alberto Lopez, is why I say it's a mismatch as of right now for Raymond Ford to want to try and unify the featherweight titles versus Luis Alberto Lopez, despite of how lucrative that fight can be for Raymond Ford and his young up-and-coming career. And a fight like that versus Luis Alberto Lopez, who Luis Alberto Lopez would be considered the favorite to walk out as the winner of that fight, could derail that young and up-and-coming momentum that Raymond Ford is still building as of today. And it would be a safer bet for Raymond Ford to get in there with the WBO featherweight champion if he wants to unify the featherweight titles at featherweight. With him being the new WBA champion, he could challenge the WBO featherweight champion who pulled off the upset of the year, according to many boxing fans, for last year. And that was considered to be one of the best fights, if not the fight of the year for last year. And I'm talking about Rafael Espinoza. Now, that would be a heck of a fight for both Raymond Ford and Rafael Espinoza, who recently just made their splash amongst the top of the featherweight division. And with both fighters recently coming onto the scene as a top featherweight champion, with both fighters being relatively new when it comes to championship status. They're both hungry. They're both trying to gain more of a reputable reputation. Now, that's why that would call for a heck of a fight. And both fighters, both champions, have a lot to prove. And that's why that fight with Ford and Espinoza is more of a sensible fight to make happen than a fight with Luis Alberto Lopez. And that's because right now Lopez is in a league of his own. And if you look at the current Ring Magazine rankings, which the Ring Magazine, the lineal title belt, doesn't have a champion crown at featherweight as of right now. They have Mauricio Lara ranked as the number one ranked featherweight. Now, Lara, he has just as much experience as Luis Alberto Lopez. It's just the fact that Lara isn't a champion. Well, he used to be after he lost that fight versus Lee Wood in their second fight. And I thought Lara was deserving of a third fight versus Wood because he knocked out Lee Wood in their first fight. And then in the second fight, Lee Wood came in there with a different game plan that was more suitable for Lara's style, to match Lara's style and to overcome Lara from the mistakes he made in the first fight. And he properly prepped for that rematch, and he stepped up his game to gain back the WBA featherweight title versus Mauricio Lara. Now that Lee Wood has moved on to the super featherweight division and is no longer competing at the featherweight division and has vacated the WBA featherweight title, now that third fight with Lara and Wood, it seems kind of far off. And since Mauricio Lara is the number one ranked fighter according to the Ring magazine rankings when it comes to the featherweight division. And Lara has earned himself a mean reputation to be considered a elite featherweight, and he has enough experience. He's gotten in there with the best of the featherweights, and he hasn't fought Mauricio Lara has not fought Luis Alberto Lopez yet, and that fight would be a fan-friendly style affair that can cause for a Fight of the Year candidate because of the style both Lara and Lopez possess. And Lara, because he didn't have a good, successful outing in his championship fight versus Lee Wood. Now, I don't know if Lara, when was his most recent fight. The last time I saw Lara fight in its entirety was his rematch versus Lee Wood. And if he didn't have another fight after his rematch for that WBA title, then for him to immediately leap into another title fight versus the best featherweight champion in Luis Alberto Lopez, because let's be honest, Lee Wood, when he was champion at the featherweight division, when he was the WBA featherweight champion, he didn't have the streak that Luis Alberto Lopez has right now. And Mauricio Lara, despite the fact that Lee Wood was more technically skilled and sound than he was still able to catch Lee Wood and knock him out. And Lee Wood fought a more safer fight, more of a efficient game plan fight in the second fight. And Lara, as I said, it looked more like a continuation from the first fight before Wood got knocked out. And that's why there could have been a dispute when it came to fans when they said they don't want to see a third fight with Lara and Wood, because it looked much more like a continuation from the first fight if Wood wouldn't have got knocked out. Now, if Lara has one or two more fights versus a featherweight fighter that's considered to be a gatekeeper amongst the top of the featherweight contenders, and if Lara walks out successful at defeating those opponents, and with the reputation and the experience that Lara has, he can catapult himself into another title contention versus Luis Alberto Lopez. Now that would be a heck of a fight. And as I have said, that is the fight that I want to see happen. If not, there is still Robeisy Ramirez, who is still ranked amongst the top contenders when it comes to the featherweights. I still think, last time I checked, the WBO still has Robeisy Ramirez regarded as their number one ranked contender. And because of how competitive the fight with him and Espinoza was, it's likely that they can have a rematch for that WBO featherweight title. And I wouldn't mind seeing it, as I said, because of how competitive and how fierce their first fight was. And Robeisy Ramirez, if he's to challenge either Raymond Ford or Luis Alberto Lopez for their respective titles, it's still called for a heck of a challenge for the champions that hold those belts. And there's still top-ranked contenders amongst the top of the featherweights, guys like Isaac Dogbo, Thomas Patrick Ward, and Yoet Gonzalez, and Mark Mixayo, Brendan Figueroa, and the WBC featherweight champion Ray Vargas, who's considered to be, to many fans, I still say Luis Alberto Lopez is the number one featherweight as of right now, because Ray Vargas doesn't even have the current streak that Luis Alberto Lopez has got going on right now. And then there's also guys like Nick Ball, who had a draw in his fight versus Ray Vargas for that WBC featherweight title. Josh Warrington, Ruben Villa, and Kolmatov as well. And they got a decent, healthy scene going on in the featherweight division right now. And any of these top contenders can be worthy of challenging for any of the 1 out of 4 featherweight champions if there won't be a unification bout immediately in the future for any of these champions in the featherweight division. Anyways, that does it for this post-fight video, y'all. Subscribe for more content from this channel. Like this video. Share this video if y'all want. Click the links in the description to show y'all support for this channel. Anything will be appreciated. And I'm out, y'all. Be good. Peace.